Movement presents The Honest Pod with Karrie Garcia. Join us for honest conversations at the intersection of theology, neuroscience, and story engagement. Whether you're a coach, ministry leader, parent, or someone simply longing to love people more intentionally, we welcome you to the table. This is your invitation to greater honesty, healing, and a journey with God to reclaim your story and live free and fully alive in His love. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Honest Pod. I am really excited for today. One, because when I do this podcast, it forces my friends to have to be on here and then I get to see them because we are all so busy. So I'm like, oh good, I get an hour with you today because you signed up to be on the podcast. And maybe that's storied for me that I feel like I need transactional relationships, but we're not getting into that today. I'm just very happy that we have Dr. Christy Bauman on today, and she is here to talk with us about grief. Say hello to the people, Christy. Say hello to them.
Hello to the people. Hello to the people. Karrie, I thought the same exact thing. I was like, yes, I get to talk to Karrie for an hour. So,
I know. I almost voice texted you the other day because I was going through something and I was like, I need to voice text Christy. And then you know how it is. It's like, oh, I'm going to voice text. And then you get busy with something. And then it's like 4 days goes by. And I was like, well, I guess I'm going to see her today. So it's going to be fine.
Or start a voice text and then it gets cut off. Like you're bearing your soul to your friend, and then it gets cut off. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to try and do it again during this little window of seconds. And then you start getting, and by the time you're like, no, my heart is not it. I gave my heart.
It's done. I gave my heart to the interwebs or whatever that is. And now some AI bot is holding it. And that's the end. Yes. So true. Okay. So here's what I want to just clarify. I actually don't know the answer to. I think I might know the answer to this. It's an answer you will definitely know. But you are, you're a therapist. You are an author. You have written 3 books or 4. How many books have you written?
Yeah, that's a great question. My branding guy was like, Christy, I looked at your website. You do everything and I don't know what you do. So you're not wrong to be confused. I am a confusing ADHD human. So truth is, I can honestly say I don't know how many books I've written. 4. So one is co-written with my husband, which is going to be what we're talking about today. And we wrote a book called A Brave Lament after we lost our first son. And so that would make 4 books that I've written.
Okay, so we have Brave Lament. Let me see which ones I know. Brave Lament, Theology of the Womb, Her Rights. Mm-hmm. What am I missing?
The Sexually Healthy Woman.
Well, isn't that the irony of what I am missing? The Sexually Healthy Women. That just went out the window on my brain capacity. Well, hello. We're starting out so strongly. Okay, so those are the 4 books. And here's another question I have for you. What is your doctorate in? I should know this about you. It is in psychology.
No, it's a counseling psychology. So
okay,
yeah, it's a PhD. And my dissertation focus is on women's spiritual and sexual well-being.
Yes. Okay. That part I did not know. I did not know. So one of the things that I have learned from you and I get to learn with you is just so much about my body. Here's what you tell me this often, Karrie, you have such a sweet mind, such a sweet brain. It's very fast. You hold, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it is, and I want to bless your mind, Karrie, but also you have this body. And so one of the things that I've learned in doing so much of the story work, so much of my schooling, everything, is we are kind of like a tertiary people where things enter our mind, our brain, we learn things cognitively, they kind of move to our heart and we kind of feel them. And then we move to how do we actually embody this? And you could totally disagree with me because this has just been the experience that I've witnessed, is that the body is kind of like the last thing to engage, but it's the first thing that's telling us everything, but we don't know how to listen to it. So it's like all the sensations, all this stuff we're feeling, we're experiencing all these sensations and everything, but we don't actually know how to integrate that into our mind. It's like it takes a little while to get there because of how much truth the body holds. And therefore it's really much easier to stay in my head because I can kind of cognitively work my tasky way through it. Maybe I can feel it a little bit, but gosh, to get into my body opens up this world of risk, unknown. I don't even know how to do it. We're not taught it well. The church doesn't teach it well. So, what I want to start with, because we're talking about grief, obviously, that's what we've been talking about last week, and what we kind of are engaging in the second step of what happens when we start to name our story, is we really have to come face to face with grief because that it's living just so, so tangibly in our story. But when you kind of think of grief and you think of the embodiment of that, I want you just to riff a little bit about what does that kind of mean to you, and what has been your experience around this kind of embodiment portion of story and everything, and then the grief aspect of that.
Yeah, I love that question. I love that you keep asking the question, what about the rest of me? Like as
Yes.
much as we have safety and you found safety in your beautiful, good mind, there's that other part of you that's like, I don't want to leave the rest of her out. And so I love that about you so much, Karrie. I love that so much.
You've helped me.
Man, yes. Okay. So, how would I riff on the idea of grief? So I just want to, a caveat is I just finished a TEDx talk called Body Talks, and it goes through that understanding of, maturating from the mind all the way to the toes. And I say like,
Yes.
we're to talk from our toes. And so you can find that and understand just this psychological understanding of embodiment. But particular to grief, oh my gosh, God was so kind to give us grief to get in our bodies. And our first thought with grief is like, no, it's sort of like, I want to understand it or I don't want to feel it. And I think what you've been talking about in this series on grief is the idea of we name our stories, right? So grief is named in story. Then
Yes.
grief is felt in body. Then grief is metabolized in our spirits. And so if we're looking at that trajectory, what we're seeing is now if we're in the body, that we have tears. Tears come. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll be in worship and I might not even know the song, but I will feel something prick in my just
Yes.
tears prick, right? And or you know, the sadness of fall. Like school started this week for my children, and we're a little bit early here on the East Coast, but something about putting them from their summer days in their swimsuits and the lake and on their rafts to on the bus and picking them up in their uniforms, there was a grief in me, a tenderness that I just felt some sadness, like, oh, transition's happening, change is happening. And I think particularly for the mother body, but for all of the bodies, whenever we're transitioning through something, there's grief. So I would
Mm.
just like to mention that tears, we have three types of tears. We have basal tears, we have reflexive tears, and we have emotional tears. And tears are about regulating. God
Mm.
was so kind that he gave us tears to regulate us. So basal tears are what lubricating our eyes all the time. So it's like an ongoing, ever-bearing tear.
Mm.
And helping us to keep infection out of our eyes. It's continuous and they're really thin, thin tears. Then reflexive tears are like a reaction to flush out dirt that's trapped in our eyes or smoke. If there's a California, if there's a fire or something going
Mm-hmm.
on. And we have this reflexive response where we cry to flush something out. So the last one is emotional tears. And that is when we're releasing hormones and chemicals from our bodies. So like prolactin and ACTH, like these are regulating our stress. And those are excreting hormones that in our body would be toxic. And yet we're crying them out. And so I
Wow.
feel like our first step is understanding that God knew grief was going to be a part of this story again and again and gave us tears to help regulate us and honor, I think, what's happening around us and make visible what's invisible. So many times, grief, you can see a person and you have no idea what they're carrying. in their
Mm.
body, their heart, in their mind. And yet tears give us a visible understanding of that person's sad. That person's moved by this. That person's body is kind of giving us an understanding that there's some form of grief happening.
Oh my gosh. Just that alone, I'm like, I have 1,000 questions. But if this is such a gift, and I agree with you, especially when it's held so beautifully, why do you think that there's such an avoidance, even like such a minimization? Oh, my kid is graduating. I'm sad, but I'm going to avoid that. Like I don't want to deal with that, or that feels really overwhelming and sad. And why do you think there is such an avoidance to entering into grief from your perspective? If it's such a gift,
Right.
why
Right.
does it not feel like a gift?
Well, I think because it's so vulnerable and it leads to intimacy. And so,
Hmm.
I'm not going to bring a ton of information on sexuality in this talk, but like sexuality holds a ton of grief, right? Our bodies hold grief because we are intimate with someone when someone sees our face change, or when
Yes.
someone knows we're vulnerable by being impacted by our child leaving our home. And yet, when someone knows that and we share that, then you have the friend who's also feeling it call you on a day where you've just got home from maybe coming back from something and there's no one in your home. It's
Mm.
quiet in the kitchen and you're going to make yourself some tea or some coffee. And all of a sudden, you feel the loneliness, the absence, the void, just that rushing in of loneliness.
Mm.
And those are moments where if someone knows that that's the season you're in, they can enter it with you. They can
Mhm.
call and be like, hey, is your house quiet too? My house is
Mhm.
quiet.
Mhm.
Do you feel your children like gone? And so I think it's actually something we want so bad, but it requires us to be vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable, right, we're susceptible. And so we don't have
Mhm.
our guard up. We don't look a certain way. We're not presenting something exciting. I mean, I remember after I lost my son, I was like, oh, I don't want to be known as the woman for grief. Like,
Mm.
it's not sellable. It's not funny. It's not enjoyable. And I like to be funny and I like to be liked and I like to enjoy life. And so the
Right.
idea that, um, that grief was going to make me vulnerable to other people and maybe even not likable.
Mhm.
It's the same with the depressed person, the anxious person, where we're just trying to hold back those maladaptive behaviors so that people want to be with us. No one walks away and they're like, man, she was so depressed. I can't wait to hang out with her tomorrow.
Right.
Nobody's thinking, no one's saying that. I mean,
Right.
not in my circle. Um,
Right.
and so, but I do think grief is different than depression and anxiety. I think grief is actually the giving way to those things, to whatever the underlying thing is, right? Parker Palmer says grief is just gravity keeping us closer to the earth. It's actually a safety
Oof.
grounding us, right? And anxiety is just energy inviting us into what is asking us to come to, like to wake up to. And so if that's the case for those two, disorders or psychological maladaptive behaviors, really under that is grief. That's the healthiest part of sharing what I'm depressed about or what I'm anxious about. And then when we see someone come to that place where they actually get in their body, they're not depressed or anxious anymore. They're sad.
Yes.
And then their grief gives way, I think, to being joy.
Yes. And, even if it's not anxious or depression, it's these, we talk a lot about the maladaptive behaviors, but I'm just going to stay busy. I'm just going to avoid, I'm just going to do whatever. But it keeps people from actually getting close to you. And I had a friend tell me, I mean, he's kind of a friend. He's more of like my therapist, but he, story work coach, but he said, Karrie, when you keep us from you,
Mm,
it actually, and he said this in love, but he's like, "It's actually annoying." And I was
mm,
like, that's sad, but also tell me more." But he's
yeah.
like, "Because I want to be close to you, but there's something there's this something in you that keeps you," and you don't know this, but we've been talking, there's been a theme story of naming the story, whatever, that I brought up several episodes ago, and I'll bring it up here because you were a part of it, about a moment on a bench at a beach where two friends wanted to see my face. And it was very difficult for me. Like every part of my body was in panic. And really, Kathy was on a couple of weeks ago, and we began to talk about that moment on the beach. And then I talked about this other girl that was there, which was you, and it's this invitation to say, we actually want to see you, but everything in my body, my head was like, I want all the stuff you guys are offering. I want sisterhood. I want to be seen. And we've gone through this a little bit, even with Kathy, but what it brought about in my body after that was over was, one, there was some shame, but there was just I am so panicked being on this bench, even though I want this, and this overwhelming sense of grief of naming, this has not been my experience. And my experience has been consumption and, transactional relationships and all of these things. So I'm scanning your guys' faces, trying to figure out, what do I need to do here to be in relationship with you guys? And also not to look like I'm not capable. I'm, like, you're not going to want to do work with me anymore. Like Carrie's unstable, like all these things. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And what I hear you saying is, underneath all of that panic, underneath all that wall, underneath is this level of grief and longing of what I really have wanted and not received. But we come up against really bodily structures that keep us from that. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. And if you remember that day, you had said no to going with your team on a
Yeah.
trip you really wanted to. You wanted to for work reasons, and you wanted to have that experience with them. And then you ended up, kind of with the pressure too of, okay, I've made this choice to then stay here and this and take time for myself and get time. And then, like, what if it doesn't work? What if they don't like me? What if my body doesn't follow directions of like showing up vulnerably and still likable? I mean,
Mhm.
you're not wrong. The body is made all of these safeguards and all of these walls because it knows that if it's not chosen, right, it just doesn't want to be rejected.
Yeah.
And grief, I do have to say this though, what I've learned about grief is that when we offer our grief, if someone does not move towards it or feel connected to it, when we offer clean grief,
Mhm.
it's not someone that you want in your life.
Right.
And
Right.
you don't bond with them. If someone doesn't bond to you when you're out there in your openness, like that's not, then that wasn't to be. Like that relationship wasn't to be. And I have never seen more powerful intimacy than when people offer their holiest, unabashed, rage-filled grief.
Yes. And we see that so much, like in story work, and, when we're in this circle together where we're offering our story and someone's reading it accurately or with care, and they're naming things that like our body knew, but someone's putting language, and the tears just come, the whole room leans in. Even
Mhm.
if that person is pulling away, they're now in a war with this. And this is what happened on the bench, is like, I'm now in a war with the reality that your two faces are coming closer to me. And I know everything. Like, I know in my head, you guys love me. I know in my head, I'm at a war even with my head and my body. And I'm watching you guys come closer. And although in that moment, it wasn't like in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. It ended with like, what am I going to do with what just happened here? How am I going to look at this? But it invited me into a further conversation around, I'm actually not okay with the fact that this is how my body wants to show up all the time. And not with contempt, but with truly like, what will it look like to offer care to this part of me that actually wanted that bench more than anything in my life, wants to be a part of the sisterhood, wants to have two women faces look at me that don't need anything from me. So I say all of that because what we have shared on this podcast is like grief. A lot of times people are like, well, I cry by myself.
Yeah.
Like I'm sad, like it. So I should be fine. And even though I've cried many times by myself, but put me on a bench and what the heck, dude? Like it's crazy. Right. And so I'd love to kind of disseminate this idea around grief, how grief is not, it's not this isolated event that we have created it to be. If we even allow ourselves to feel grief, often it's done in isolation. But the first thing that we say here is that grief has to have three components: connection to self, connection to God, connection to others. I'd love for us to break down with you around those three components. And I believe that it does have to start with the self. Like I can't go to others if I don't know, David says, I cried out from the pit of my despair, and I had to wait with long suffering for the Lord to come. And then I was able to share with others. I mean, that's like the whole Psalms 41-3 breaks that all down. And he starts with his own tears, his own acknowledgement of, I'm in despair. And he's looking for someone to come. Could you help us break down a little bit in the idea of starting with grief in this connection to self and then God and then others, and we can kind of talk through it?
Yeah. It's so interesting that I have like 3 stories that I keep wanting to share. And I feel like the Holy Spirit's like, no, this is the story. And I'm like, okay, you going to tie it back to self? Okay. But I think that even this week, right? So in our small community, our kids come off of a bus, and there's a bunch of us there. And one of my friends, another mom, has had a recurrence and of cancer, and so she's in the hospital, and she has yet to even talk through it with her kids, and so she doesn't want us to tell our kids what's happening yet, because they're trying to figure something out. So this happens just a couple of days ago, and I am so sad. Like I'm walking around, she's in the hospital, and all the other bus moms are like, we're going to send magnetic pajamas so that the IV, so, when she's trying to get off her hospital gown, this won't mess with the IV cord. We're going to send her flowers, all these things. And I was so upset inside of myself. I felt like the whole day, I just felt depressed and
Hmm.
what, and I was talking to my husband, and he said, the thing is that if she's fine or if she's not, grief is still what we're going to face. And
Hmm.
the grief that she's not there at the bus stop with us today, picking up her kids from their first day of school. The grief is that it is my worst fear, what
Right.
she's facing.
Right.
And the true grief is what I've created will not have my face if something happens, and I won't get to share in the life with them. And so I think I had to come to this point of like, oh, I'm actually grieving. This is my greatest fear. And
Right.
she texted me from the hospital just yesterday, and she said, the truth of it is I don't know how my kids are doing in school, and I want their life to feel normal right now. In the midst of this chaos, the kindest thing I could do as a mother is like protect their everyday. And she said, but I don't know how they're doing. I won't see them until the weekend. And, so anyway, I'm like, Lord, can you just, like, I'm here texting my friend, like, oh my gosh, she's texting from the hospital. She's in so much pain. She's figuring out all this stuff. What do I say? How can I offer? How can I fix it? And
Mm.
then I'm thinking my husband being like, just grieve with her. Just grieve that she can't have that. And so, you know, I get off the bus, I get to the bus stop. She's not there, obviously. Her parents are picking up her kids, and her son comes out with my son, and I'm like, hey, how was school today? And they're like, Madison and Lunetta tried to kiss us in the line on the way to the bus. But luckily, we were strong enough and fast enough to stop them. Right. And so I love this story because then I, in the chaos of the afternoon, I text my friend and I
Mm.
said, fun update. Our boys got off the bus and these girls tried to kiss them, but they were strong enough and fast enough And she wrote back and she said, of all the things I've had to think through today, this was the kindest thing to hear.
Yes.
And me and my husband just laughed about it because, right,
Mm,
it's their child that they created and that they don't have access to right now because they're dealing with their own grief and they're dealing with what do we do with a body that's ailed. And I think, I don't know why I'm bringing that up for self. And yet the story is like, I had to find my own grief and myself before I could even move towards her grief. Like,
right.
it was almost like I was borrowing it. It started off as like anxiety or like, what if I got sick? What if I got diagnosed? And you're up here with it. And then as I like let it settle into like, oh, my babies, I just want to see what I created and I want to share in there every day. Um, and so the sisterhood in that moment was like, how can I give her that? And so again, I'm like, am I breaking it down to self?
Well,
I
here's what I want to say is what I hear you saying is I think especially a lot of our listeners tend to be in like, religious context, Christian context, and so much of the context is how are we going to go serve others? How are we going to be there for others? What are we going to do for them? I need to have the answers. I need to give them scripture. But the reality is what everybody wants to give them is the fixing because they're actually not identifying their own grief in it. And so the fixing helps them kind of disassociate or separate themselves from this is really painful for me and I don't know what to do with this. So let me just fix the problem. I'm going to bring you flowers. I'm going to bring you pajamas. And it's not that that's wrong, but
no.
what you were able to offer from a real place of, and Jesus really modeled this was you were able to name your grief first about it, which then cleared the fog away to where how can I meet this woman in her grief because I've been able to identify my grief. And I think this is a really important thing for us to understand. We want to go out and be the helpers on the land, but we don't actually want to actually tend and care to our own heart. Then we're not actually able to help from an authentic, real and honest place that brings real intimacy. We actually just become peacekeepers rather than peacemakers. Per the
Mm,
scripture, that's not what he's asked us to do. And so I really do think that as the Lord is leading you to that story, what I hear in the story is all the beauty and my tears come on behalf of her. But what I feel is you would not have been able to get there had you had not paused for a minute and said, but what am I feeling? And this is something that we have a hard time with as believers, where we go, well, that's selfish to like worry about what I'm thinking about this. Like, let me just go help her. And in actuality, it's the kindest thing you could have done because then you were able to really hear from the Spirit, identify your own pain. What would I have wanted? What would, because you've been able, does that correlate with what you're bringing?
yes. And so I'm like, embodied grief in ourselves. It again, you're right. I was taught like that's selfish to think of myself, but I needed to feel like, oh, wait, if I wasn't here on my kid's first day of school, what am I afraid of? I am afraid that at the end of the day, death is going to steal something from me.
Mhm.
That is going to hurt so badly. And so in a way, the way to take away the sting is to bring the life to the moment, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, God, in my gratitude, she is alive and I'm alive to then hear this story about our boys. And such a silly story, but it wasn't silly.
Mm-mm.
It was a life in this present moment. And God is the author of that. And when I submit to that, I find like my gratitude is, yeah, my grief is that you'll take that away. And the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And so
Mhm.
something about that feels like you're right. I have to go to the embodied grief in myself first.
Mhm. Yes. So with that being said, I mean, that's a little bit of a different situation because it's grief on someone else and identifying the own grief in your own life. But when we're walking into our own seasons of grief and our own seasons of what we are holding, really, and I think of your son or, the things that you've walked through, the things I've walked through, there was this first invitation of the tears fall for me. Like I have to be able to name for myself it was not supposed to be this way. And I need to be able to have the freedom to name the despair that David is so clearly talking about that I'm holding. Because what you said earlier was grief is about intimacy. It's invitation and intimacy. The absence of grief is there's no invitation and there's no intimacy. It's severed. There's a part of us that's severed. And so as you've looked at the stories of people that you've worked with, and even in your own story, the essentialness of naming grief for their, feeling grief, embodying grief for their own story allows for invitation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you think about the invitation of then what does it look like to invite God in? I mean, there's a narrative, just give it to God. I hate that actually. Because God is relational, not just like a genie that we throw stuff to and hope his Jesus juice lands on us. But what would you say about how that, maybe in your own life or what you've seen, how naming grief personally has invited somehow the spirit of God? What does that look like? I don't even know totally what I'm asking, but maybe you'll make sense of it in this connection to God, peace, and grief.
Well, I think embodiment of grief with a creator, with God, is this idea that I rage usually. Like for me, it's a lot about rage. And
Mhm.
then I release it, then there's relief. And to me, that actually follows some sense of the Holy Week, some sense of Good Friday, Holy
Mm.
Saturday, Resurrection Sunday. But even in that, with God, there is a sense where I'm so angry with him that he made this cycle. I'm so angry that death is part of the life cycle. And
Mhm.
so I think with God, there's so much rage in my mind.
Mhm.
And when I can be honest about that, and when I can rage to God that, the simple thing of like that cut flower is going to die. And
Mhm.
I just wish you would have bought me a plant that lives forever or something like that. Like, I, there's something where I'm like, God, I'm so mad that you didn't think of a better plan.
Mhm.
I really do. If I'm honest, it's
Mhm.
because it hurts. It hurts so much when something ends or is taken away or has to cycle through. And then in the release, I feel like it gets really quiet for me and with me and God, where God's still there, in the waiting. And to me, that's definitely the winter season, but like where everything goes dormant, like, oh, it has died, it's in the ground, and now we're waiting. And then spring comes again and something gets rebirthed. And
Mhm.
I am so grateful. Like in those
Mhm.
moments, I'm so grateful for salvation. I'm so grateful for the gospel in that
Right.
moment. It never starts out with embodiment of grief with God for me in gratitude. It always starts out in rage personally.
Yes.
And I rage and then I have to relinquish and then I wait and then enough time passes and something always comes out of the ground again.
Yeah.
Something always fruits again. And I can both love and hate that. And also that's the way he's designed it.
If you look at theology and you go, well, I wonder, and we'll know more of these when we get to heaven, but I wonder if God hates it too. Like if he made us for Eden and that was the plan, and the plan was eternal living, which we know something in our body, like it's not supposed to be this way. That's why we don't do well at saying goodbye to people. It's why death is so hard. It's why, we have to even call Friday Good Friday, because it's like the sting of that is just, it's incomprehensible of what our bodies can bear. And I always wonder, like, when my mom committed suicide, I feel like God was like, it was never supposed to be this way. Like the intention was for her to live.
Mhm.
And yet sin and how, we can get into the theology of that. But what I hear you saying is, and I don't know what you think about that. What do you think about that? About the theology around, like, do you think that God weeps with us and grieves with us for what is happening on behalf of an earth that is far from what he intended, but still has sovereignty over?
I think what you say is so true. I think that's actually understanding and it's so intimate, right? When you think about a God who raged in the wake of your mother's free will of choosing to take her own life, like a God that rages. I don't know that I could trust or serve or continue in relationship with a God that didn't also rage with me, right? And it's
Right.
always these bigger stories of well, free will because I love you, and
Right.
and the parent part of us and the parent part of God and the childlike part of us that understands that free will can take us, can remove us from the presence of other people. And I also think grief is that doorway. I think grief
Yeah.
and that rage is that doorway, even in our own relationship with God.
Yeah. And I think having these conversations with God over these big things, the loss of your son, the loss of my mother, these things that as I raged, because how can you not be angry over something that you're like, this is beyond comprehension? The loss of your son, the loss of my mother. These are things that I'm like, I'm not supposed to know this. These are things I'm not supposed to know as far as like a timeline of what it means to be human. Moms aren't supposed to lose their children, and kids aren't supposed to lose their moms to suicide. Like those are things that aren't supposed to happen in what we would call normality of humanity. And yet they do happen. But it was when I raged at God. I raged with God. I mean, there were things I said to God that I'm like, please don't kick me out of heaven. And yet I just felt like it's in those moments that invitation of my long suffering, of him sitting in the pit with me, not looking down, going, why can't you get it together? Like, just trust me or whatever. It was like getting down there with me. And I felt his rage with me. Like I felt his presence of rage. Like I wasn't alone in this. Now, did I tangibly hear his voice? Sometimes, but like most of the time, it was just a knowing. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding in the midst of my rage. Like that invitation brought me closer to him. And I wondered what you'd say, because I think people, especially Christians, have a hard time getting close to the word rage. They go, Jesus wept. Jesus
Mhm.
wept and then he rose Lazarus. There was this invitation to intimacy, like I'm with you and it's not supposed to be this way. Yes, I'm going to rise Lazarus, but I always say that was Jesus's humanity moment. And then his God moment was raising, but that was him being fully human in that moment. And yet when it comes down to things like rage, well, am I rageful that my son is graduating high
Mhm.
school and going to go on to college? I don't know if I would necessarily say I'm rageful, but I am sad. And if I'm being honest, the way you're talking about it, I am sad that I know this sounds weird, but like you made me love my son so much that
Mhm.
now that he's leaving, it's like you're letting a piece of my heart be ripped away, which may sound dramatic, but I feel like that. And so I want to minimize that. But I'm like, oh, would I associate that to rage? Probably not. But there is a little bit of like, I don't like this.
Mhm.
I don't like how this structure is set up. I
Mhm.
don't know if that makes sense of what I'm saying. Maybe I'm just getting free therapy right now.
Well, it makes total sense to me in that there is lowercase g grief and there's uppercase G grief. And I think that there are things that are appropriate in that situation. But grief, any way we look at it, big griefs and little griefs, the truth of it is an invitation to knowing God's heart. Because if we are made in the image of God, so if we are
Mhm.
the imago Dei and we bear the image of God, then my guess is my rage is holy rage because it bears a characteristic of what
Mm,
God is. I don't think God put us humans on the earth to invent new feelings that God didn't already have.
come on.
It's just, who do we think we are? I'm sorry.
Wow.
And that's the part that I think he tells the parent. Sadly, what I feel like he had to tell me was like, Christy, you're under the impression that you love your child more than I do. And
Mm,
that's actually just not true. Like, I am the author of all of this. And so really, I think the more bold I get in my rage and in my wildness of feelings, the closer I get to intimacy. And I would even, challenge like ecstasy in the understanding of my relationship with God. The
Mm.
closer I feel to believing a God who actually loves my child more than me, but loved me enough to let my child bear my image. And as they leave to go off to college,
Mm.
and I no longer get to wake them up in their bed every morning, and they will go off and build their own life. Like, it's the part of the cycle I don't like, but the idea that I would closet myself with the thought that God doesn't love that child as much as me and actually withhold my grief and the intimacy of God and I grieving together as parents of that child.
Ooh.
Like, why do we not believe that his greatest love story, God's greatest love story, was with us?
Right.
And so I want to be like weeping and yelling and throwing things and then like nursing myself back to, in a bath and watching Netflix with God. Like,
With God. I
not alone.
love that, Christy. I love the idea of what you just said, that we actually get to grieve as parents together with this holy grief that says, like, oh, he's leaving now or she's going now. And we're going to let her fly. And there's beauty in that. But as a parent, God feels our sense of parenting, like our sense of, yes, there are things that I have to let you do because I give you free will and it breaks my heart. And also, I'm so happy when you return. And I'm so happy for like this connection again. And then there is some point where I am releasing my son back to his first father, back to his first mother, like
That's
to
right.
the mother that loves him. Oh, it's gonna make me cry. But the mother that loves him more, God mother, who loves my son, my daughter more than I do. And he's going, oh, I can feel that with you, but she's in good hands. But I want to hold the tears of what it means to have to in essence give her back to me. That's wild. That's we could pause the podcast there and just sit in that, and maybe you're listening and you need to, maybe you just need to press pause and go, I need to sit in this for a minute, because there is some deep theology coming out here that is moving me and is like my whole world is coming to like dots are connecting. But with
We're
that being said, I want to make sure that we get to this third part, because it's really important. This connection to self, connection to God. That's a beautiful way of just unpacking that, which then leads us in this grief. And we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but with grief and connection to others and the invitation of what that is for. And here's the thing is, some of us, a lot of us are very good, or at least better at grief with self and God. We can kind of do that. It's when we move into this connection to others that it gets a little wonky. But I
Mhm.
say all the time, I'm like, look, if you are wanting to heal in the fullness that God created and you are healing with yourself and God, you will not heal. Not in the completion of what God has. It's not the design of God.
That's
It's
right.
not the design. And so, would you just unpack a little bit? What comes to mind for you when you think of this idea of connection to others, which is usually kind of, the third step, but it doesn't mean it's like pulled apart, that clearly of step one, step two, step three. But usually we feel something inside. We somehow engage that with God and like the spirit because it lives within us. And then there's an invitation, right? To invite someone into that. What comes up for you when you think about the hard, the good, the ugly, whatever, when it comes to connection and grief with others and the importance of that?
Well, I think the same way we've, in a sense, westernized this understanding of grief, right? Whether it's with ourselves and how it should look, with God and how it should look theologically. I think we've done it with the church or with community. We've decided how it should or shouldn't look. And actually, we've kind of deduced it down to, sadly, like a really social media, like a very simple, like, I'm going to post a grief or I'm going to post a rest in peace or someone's passed, and I'm going to post this. And then we either can like it or put a comment on it. And there is such a removal from communal grief. Whereas truthfully, communal grief is where everyone is needed in
Mm.
parts. And so like even understanding ululation, whereas in Africa, whenever there's grief over a funeral, we need each other's voices almost to get us to the pitch of grief that we're trying to. And so you need the village, even in reaching the place where your body can release. And, whether we use that in the understanding of rage too, but in our tears and in the rage and the anger that then leads us to the release. And so church, I think, has given up. We, in a liturgical sense, will go through the steps of burial. But, we're not bringing our bodies together with each other to need them. We're not leaning each other to like reach a point where I'm not thinking, Karrie, I actually need you and I need your body near mine for me to reach the point of fully releasing something that is lost in our community. And so we've really westernized it, and we've even brought it into a technology age where we're not touching each other, we're not hearing each other, we're not holding each other. And the best story I can go to is when my son died, our church had a grief ceremony, and I will, never forget my friend Karen in her fiery red hair, just picking up this piece of glass and walking outside of the church building, but we could all see her through the glass doors. And she just screamed and she threw this glass on the concrete and it just shattered everywhere. And, my thought is like, who's going to pick that up? It's going to cut somebody. We're near a street, so like it's going to get in people's tires. I'm thinking of these like logical senses, and I had to ask her to do it again because my first inclination was to let my body respond or feel what her grief was invoking and inviting in me. I was actually so culturized. I was like, we got to clean this up. That's wild. That's too out there. We're crazy church.
Right.
And yet to watch her get her body to that place of rage and then release, my body was given permission to rage and to release.
Wow.
And that idea of moving your body through an action of breaking something or of hitting something or of beating something or bringing my voice to a place of wailing. And Rumi says, wailing is the doorway to God. And I think it's true. I think grief and communal grief is an invitation. The Tower of Babel, we were trying to figure out the language to get us to heaven, and we were building upright. And I think God already gave us that. I think when we grieve and ululate communally, there's not a tongue that's describable. And I think we are right at the feet of Jesus. I think God stops everything when a community grieves to its most guttural level. I think there's nothing in the world that stops God like that. When it's not just one, but it's multiple coming together and finding, I think that's the sound that stops God in God's tracks and says, I hear you. I hear you. I know that guttural feeling, that guttural.
Even when you said when she threw the glass, I immediately, my chest, my throat, everything, it was like, I wanted to wail, like I wanted to just, because there's something of like the kindness and the love of someone to say, when the scripture says you weep when someone's weeps and you rejoice, like to go, I'll enter into this with you in a way that is radical and visceral, that even from afar, I mean, I know Karen, but from afar, I'm not there. I didn't even know you then, and immediately it takes me in and it allows her act and your invitation to see the story to hit something in me that goes, oh my gosh, she's throwing something and I feel it even on behalf of my story. Like that's it, like it moves past even the fact that I'm not there and I wasn't there and yet I'm there. I feel it. And I love what you said. I think that is the sound that stops God dead in his tracks and says, I'm listening.
Yeah.
And it's the cry of our hearts, yes, in the secret and the quiet, but where two or more are gathered,
Yeah.
the Spirit of God is there. And I wonder, we think of that in terms of like, worship, or we're coming to church.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are gathered in wailing on
Yeah.
behalf of one another, there is something so holy and sacred about that. And it's an opportunity that many of us will never even be given in a lifetime, because we have so deduced it down to the funeral is 30 minutes.
Right.
You're going to stand there, you're going to see the body maybe in a beautiful casket. It's all curated, and then you walk away and you go and you're left with this, I saw someone that I love dead.
Mm-hmm.
I embrace them. And whether it's that big G, like you said, or a communal of moms coming together saying, do we have permission to wail for the fact that we aren't moms the way we were moms? That my friend posted today, can we talk about the fact, it'll make me cry, but can we talk about the fact that my back seat for 20 years has been filled with kids and snacks, and I got in my car today and my car is quiet. The back seat is empty, and she's smiling about it. And I'm like listening to this reel and I'm like crying, because I'm like, man, like the back seat is empty. There is a death there. Like there's an end of something that was life, and it can still be good life for them, but there's also loss there. And so like
Mm-hmm.
that entered me into the story with her in a way that makes me want to call her really and go like, can we just talk about your back seat? Which she may go, no, right? Like she may set me up to say, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. And I can only say, well, I'm not fine after that, because I've felt something deeply. So here's how I'd like to end. Thank you for all of that. This is a long podcast because we need to sit in this, and you're one of the wisest, most kindest women I've ever met in my life, like ever. There's something about you that makes me go, I want to be alive, and I want to know someone. I want to be loved the way that you loved. I want to be mothered the way that you mothered. There's something about you. And I hope it translates to the people listening, because I think there's just something we've lost about a woman that's willing to be wild and throw glass on our behalf, that's willing to say, like, I want to sit on a bench with you and then put sound bowls on your body and pray over your forehead and put my hands underneath your scapula. And like, I'm laying there like, going, is this witchcraft, or are we, is God? And you're like, Spirit is here, Karrie. There's something about your willingness to touch my body and to invite me into something that I will do for so many, but very hypervigilant about it being done for me, that I hope is being translated through this little silly podcast. But as we're ending our time together, I would love for you to, and there's men that listen, but to mother us in a way that invites us in with your last thoughts to the possibility of what it could mean to grieve whatever we're grieving. What would you want to say to those that are listening that need to hear on behalf of their big grief or small grief, but grief nonetheless?
Yeah. That you are telling them, giving them a roadmap. And what we both are saying is the roadmap, if God was kind enough, it's right in here. So that any of us who are walking around with a spirit in us, right? As long as we understand ourself and our stories of grief, and then we understand that God is with us in it, and we have that relationship of understanding God's grief, I think then that's where we get real wild and we move it into community. But what I would say is every person is their own spirit. There's a spirit that lives in them that obviously does commune with God's spirit, with the Holy Spirit, but you have something inside of you and you're in charge of how you're going to foster that. part of you, your spirit, your presence, how people see you in the grocery store or engage you when they hold your eyes, right? Or you don't give them your eyes because you don't have time for that. Whatever it is, you actually are the author of that. You get to co-author in that story. And so I would just say grief is such a gift. And I would have never said that before. I would never have said that. But as we keep moving into a world that is going faster and faster, that our children are leaving our home, that screens are taking their faces from us,
Yes.
whatever this society and culture that I'm in Western America, it is, grief is the holiest gift because it makes me stop and it makes me hold my own eyes or God's eyes or the eyes of the other. And I think tears are the way we baptize each other in a day and age when grief is just continuing to be pulled away from us, to be cleaned up. And you know, we have very sterile grief processes. We have very sterile deaths. We have made pain and suffering as limited as possible with the amounts of medication and numbing agents that we have. We can make things so sterile and so clean and so painless. And honestly, I would not have said this, 12 years ago when my child died, but God is kind with the gift of grief.
Yes.
The messiness and the rage of grief has been the kindest gift to me. It's the only thing that's actually made me want to keep living is by grieve. And so what is the grief within ourselves? What is the way we believe that God engages grief? And how are we doing it with others? Like that, I think it's an invitation.
That
I think it's
is.
an invitation to holy, holy intimacy.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I brought you on, because you are, it's weird. You're the professional griever. You're like, wow, thanks. That's really a fun. You do so much.
Love that. They'll be like, that's good.
Yes. There's so much more that you offer, but I will say that to touch our body is to touch grief. And you are the one person that I know when I think of what it means to touch a body and to live in a body. It is you. You invite us into that in such a beautiful way. If they're like, man, I would love to get in touch with Christy more. I would love to know more about what you do. I know we had talked about all the books that you wrote, but it does sound like Brave Lament would be, if grief is where you're at, would be a good invitational book for them. Where could they get that? Where do they find you? Give us some of those stats.
So where you find me is christybauman.com. So Christy, Christy, Bauman, Bauman.com. And but what I would say is, if anything that I'm talking about or that Karrie's talking about has resonated in your body, it might not be your particular grief, but my husband and I made a documentary that's free to watch. It's 40 minutes and it's online. It's abravelament.com, and it's free to watch. Watching it with a friend, watching it with a partner, watching it with anyone in your community, or alone by yourself. It just gives us curiosity and creativity around grieving. And I think that's so important because I think we've lost creativity. And what I am in the belief of is every person is different. And so how you will grieve will look different than everyone else. And it should. We actually need you to grieve in your own self and your own particularities for each other to communally grieve to the what I would say the greatest level. So abravelament.com, I would say, would be the way I would go. If I was listening to this podcast, it resonated with me. It's a free way to just get some curiosity and creativity around your grieving in your own life and your own story.
Perfect. And I know that, we talked last week with or a couple weeks ago with Kathy about, sacred interruptions. So they know a lot about that, but this is the Christy we referred to in that episode. If you're wanting to do sacred interruptions, kind of story work, body work with them. And then also just, she does have a website and you can go see the things on there. guys, Christy, I want to thank you for being on. Thank you for such a rich conversation. We laughed, we cried, of course. And always, always such a good conversation with you. Makes me always love God. Whenever I am with you, I love myself more. I love God more, and it makes me love people more every time I'm with you. And that is rare. So thank you for inviting me into that. I hope that you guys had stuff to think about, that you were allowing yourself to be in this. Maybe you took some pauses and breaks during this episode, which might be good because we covered a lot of ground. But I hope that you're walking away understanding the bottom line of what Christy is and God has invited us into is that grief is actually a gift. It's not the thing that moves you to the despair. It's the thing that moves you to emboldened life that says, I can do this with God, and he's not afraid of any parts of me. He welcomes all of them. Christy, thank you so much for being on the Honest Pod. We love you so much. We are so thankful for the talented Tanya Godsey offering her amazing music with us. You can find Tanya on Spotify and other streaming platforms. And as always, thank you for letting us share about the not so easy stories that make us and entering into the honesty and courage it takes to love who you were created to be. So until the next time, friends, may God's love and kindness be an offering to your heart, both now and always.